Okay, welcome everybody to the third Saturday program. We do this every third Saturday. We've been doing it for probably 3 or 4 years now, and it's been very successful. Let's get started. Mike Payne is, of course, probably goes without any introduction. He's been in the community. I guess he's the third or fourth generation Chattanoogan, or at least Tennessean, and he'll tell you some things about himself. But let me tell you the things that I know. All the years he's been here as a master gardener in Chattanooga longer than I have, and I've been here 16, 17 years. He's 20 plus, I think 20, or maybe closer to 25 or 26 years in the master gardener program, and he's just been a very good mentor to all the other master gardeners as they come into the program. And on top of that, he's got rain gardens a little bit, and he's given this seminar to a lot of the leaders in the state and throughout, a lot of the master gardeners. So today he's going to talk to the third Saturday program. Mike, take it away.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Like I said, a lot of you know me. I'm very active. I still stay that way. And Tom was right. This is my 26th year, and to me, it's always changing. If you're a master gardener, you get out and you never learn it all. And I'm surprised. I tell Tom all the time, I'm surprised when people ask me questions, just how much I learned by osmosis. This talk is actually one of the ones I enjoy doing. And like Tom said, I've actually got a longer talk. I'm going to do the shorter one today. The one that's 2 hours is the one I gave to the EPA and talked to them. And before COVID, I was scheduled to actually try to meet with the Southeast Regional and the director of the EPA to look at rain gardens as a possibility to try to save money and also save the water quality that we have. And we'll give you some information about smart yards after we're done with this, at which Tom and I both do. And I think it's one of the best things I do. I do teach a lot about turf grass, but also to me, this is one of the favorite subjects I actually have. So people always ask me, what is a rain garden? And basically you can take a bad area of your yard and look at it of where the drainage goes. Everybody has downspouts off their house, or you've got some kind of runoff, or you might have a ditch, or you might have an old swell. You can actually make that one of the most beautiful areas in your yard by taking and looking at the structure. Because all it is like I put up here in the front, I try to keep the reading to a minimal, but in this case, it's good to understand because a lot of people don't understand exactly what a rain garden is. It's all it is a shallow man-made landscaped area that captures the water for a short amount of time. It's very shallow, and it holds it. You don't want to hold it more than 48 hours. And I was sort of hoping we'd get past this where I could actually do this live. It's one of the things, but it's really interesting to see how it works because the water will run into this area, it'll hold it, and then it runs on off. And there's so many different ways you can do this. So after it captures the water, it allows the time to infiltrate into the soil. And then in the indented area, or maybe you may have just made like a little dam in there, or you may have put an under drain in it. And I'll show you some different alternatives here. You utilize the plants and the soils that you have, and you amend it, and then it makes a very attractive landscape. As you can see, the one that's up in the left-hand corner, it's really good. It was just an old shallow drain spot that they had in a yard, and they used plants in there that were really good. And so they've got, amend the soil, and that one there may or may not have an under drain, or it's got an outfall at the very end, down at the far end. So it's something that everybody can actually do. And if you look at this right here, you capture the water from impervious areas. And all that is, impervious just means it won't allow it, like driveways, patios, sidewalks, maybe a street. And so you reduce the runoff that's going off the site, because on an average home that's about 2,000 square feet, you get a 1/4 inch rainfall, you're going to get 600 gallons off of that roof. So just think of that water running off there and how much rain we've actually had this year. And it runs straight into the storm structure. And that's what you'll see as I go through this. That's how we thought in the past. Now you can you look at this area, you got coneflower, you got black-eyed Susans in there, you got shrubs. This is actually a rain garden or an old swell that was there that they've turned it around and made it a very beautiful area. So when the rain water runs off in this area, it actually infiltrates into the soil and waters all the plants.
Hey,
So
Mike, do
yeah,
you see that gray box in your video? There's a little gray box that kind of obscures.
hold on a second. Hold on a second. Let me do this, Tom. How's that?
It's smaller. It's
All right, hold on a minute. Let's see if I can.
almost gone.
Let's do this. Put it right down at the bottom. How's that?
Yes,
Better?
it's much
Okay.
better.
Okay. What it was the photo, the box I pulled up, see everybody there.
Okay.
Okay. So if you look at the benefits of rain garden, it's low maintenance, low water use, and it improves your landscape. Look at this ditch in the front of this house that was out in the front. The water was actually in two locations. So the tree is actually on a berm that's in the middle where a storm drain runs through. So they took the entire area, which was looking very bad, and they allowed the water to run into it. One's in a shade garden, the other one's in a full sun. So you can have both. So if you look at it, this increases the infiltration of rainwater into your landscape from the impervious areas, and you can infiltrate as much as 30% more water than a flat or sloped lawn. So if you've got an area in there that you take and allow the water to run to, it actually will help it. So it's going to reduce the flood risk as we all add this. Can you imagine in a neighborhood, let's say you only got 100 houses, and each one has a 100 square foot rain garden. That's an area 10 by 10. And you take that area and that holds that water in there for that, you got that quarter or half inch, thunderstorm during the summer, it'll hold that water and keep it from running off the property so quick. So it's going to reduce the amount of flooding and downstream destruction, whereas we used to just dump it on to somebody else and run downhill. So you look at the different area, it also can create a different habitat. Some people make the rain gardens. I'll give you some examples of showing how you can take and look at it in different ways, because I've actually talked to a lady. She had a rut that ran through her backyard. When I say a rut, it was just a big empty ditch. And what we did, we designed it where that would terrace it, and it would have waterfalls in there, run over the top of it, and then drop into a pool. She had under drains. Under drains are just like a field septic line. They have holes in it. It allows the water to drip into the pipe on the bottom. Then it'll run out the bottom of the pipe down to the next. Then the next, we did like 6 steps, and she was able to hold in there and make it just one of the most beautiful things. It looks like a natural area, that Mother Nature created, because we use river stone and rock around. So you have to take a look at your yard and see what it gives you. Here's some other facts about the rain gardens that I like. Ponding should be no more than 48 hours. Now, everybody's putting their heads, yeah, this area you get mosquitoes. If it says there more than 48 hours, they will find the water, they will lay the eggs, and you will get mosquitoes there. So if you can allow it where it drains, that's the reason for the underdrain, because we have heavy chert clay soils here that are really bad. And I talked about those in the past in my beginning in my Master Gardener classes. But you're going to improve the soil in and around the area if you have clay. If you're lucky enough to have the topsoil in that area, it's absolutely wonderful, because you can just take and burn it up around there and create your own real quick. The typical depth for a rain garden is 4 to 12 inches, and 6 to 8 is typically recommended around the outside. Now the berms may be a little bit different to hold the water in there. You're going to have an overflow area with it, and then the under drain which is in there, and I'll show you an example in a little bit exactly how it. So this will help the water to drain off quickly. It will not increase the mosquito numbers. And it also attracts critters in there, such as frogs, toads, and snakes. Now, snakes follow everything else. So if you're creating a habitat out there, that's what you want. You're going to get them. I used to have turtles that would show up in my pond that was in the back. And I think I've got a couple examples of it, and some of you have seen it in the past. Originally, we set it up, and we didn't do it intentionally, but the water actually flowed to the inside into the pond when it rained. it created sort of a rain garden because the water would run in there, and I had to create an overflow pipe. But I would get turtles, I'd get snapping turtles, I'd get box turtles, and then the koi that were in there absolutely loved it because they'd eat anything that got into the pond. Now, why have a rain garden? Diverts the water for natural use, uses plants for the condition. Now, people that love native plants, it's good, but you can also use a combination of both. You can use the natives, you can use the exotics. I used to love to put ferns, hostas, beauty berries, astilbe, and then I get in the early spring, I'd put some bulbs in and around where it was. So you'd still be able to grow a lot of things in there and not worry so much about it. I put a lot of shrubs. Some of the craziest things you'd ever see. I'd put elephant ears in and around the outside of that during the summer, and they grow up and look absolutely wonderful out there by the rain garden. It also helps with erosion and runoff. That's the bigger issue that we have nowadays, is because most of the time people building houses or building a subdivision, they'll strip off all the topsoil, and all you're left is just a little bit in there, and it really creates a problem. This was the old way to think about traditional drainage systems. You'd collect it, collect off the roof, put it in your downspouts, gutters, then you concentrate it into one location. Then you take and dump it out onto the street real quick, and then over into the storm drain, which ran real quickly to the river. And in our downtown area, and some of you know it, when it rained, when we got these heavy rains and the rivers backed up, our downtown storm and sewer system are all together. And if you live in the center part of town, and they never changed it, and it has a baffle at the end of the river. What it does, it diverts the water, which runs over to Moccasin Bend. Well, when the rainfall gets too heavy, those baffles actually run over, and all that stormwater and sewage downtown run into the river. People don't realize that. So by doing things like this, and I'll show you some pictures of, I don't know if I put the commercial part of it, but they did some nice stuff up in Seattle and up in that Northeast area. And they're the ones that actually started a lot of this. So what's the driving force behind this? Regulations. The federal, state, local governments basically are looking at our water and our water quality. Oh, I wonder if that changed. Okay. Did that change, Tom? Yeah, there it is. I don't know why that changed. So what it is they're looking at bioremediation. What that means is they're swapping out some bad areas that they may want to, use as development, and try to remediate some of the streams, soils. And we talk a lot about this, and Adam does when we do our smart yards. It's absolutely wonderful because you get to learn about where your watershed is. But the governments are starting to charge fees for this. Local officials, they want to charge the fees because they cannot keep up with the maintenance and footing the bill for this whole thing. So each state now, as you know, if you live in the city, you're getting a sewer and a water bill, and generally your sewer bill is double what your water is. That's the reason most of us as master gardeners, or if you've got nice gardens, put you a landscape meter in because you get a set fee for that, and you're not charged a sewer fee for that water usage. So keep that in mind when you're irrigating and water your yard. And Stephanie and I had a nice irrigation system in our yard, which actually saved us about $300 to $500 every summer because of the watering that we did. So when you're looking at this, I don't know why it's not moving forward. Okay. So you're going to improve the stream water quality. A lot of streams may not be even suitable for aquatic life. If you've lived here for any length of time, Lookout Creek down on the south side was absolutely horrendous. They spent millions. Golly, I don't know why it's jumping around. I have to go back. Yeah, they spent millions of dollars trying to improve the soil bank. And when they did that, it's done a lot, but there were, in the past, my parents, my grandparents, and my great-grandparents didn't know any better. They would just take things and dump it into the river. Now you can dig down. I can tell you places that you can go up there and dig down, and it's creating all kinds of issues. You can still see the stuff in the soil. So, but what they do with these debris and catchment bank restoration, they're adding plants that are native, natural, and it's going to reduce the maintenance on what you have to do. And keep this in mind when you're thinking about an area in your yard. You can look at the different plants for that. It's going to help a lot. Now, here's the typical fees that they're starting, and I bumped this up a little bit because I did some checking in the last couple of weeks, and the average now is up to $475 for a residential home. And this came out of Middle Tennessee. They were actually charging this because they got such a problem up there. And so if you look at it, golly, it's jumping around. Tom, I'm having some issues on my end.
Are you using the mouse?
No, not using any of it. Might need a new computer. Or a new operator. Baby.
Just use the arrow and make sure it's pretty sensitive.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to stay away from the pad. I'm using the arrows. Well, as you can see right here, the average home, they're paying, now this on a yearly basis, $57. You're not saying that's much. Take that about 100,000 times. And that's how much money is being spent. So what I'm trying to do with the EPA by using rain gardens, if somebody puts one in, that top fee you see up there, that extra $57 that you have to pay goes away. And it's even bigger if you look down at the bottom. If that was a church, say you've got 34,000 square feet, well, you're going to multiply that 16. They're paying $941 a year for water, for that. And they're just charging them because, that's their fee for keeping up with all the water runoff. So the costs are going to be added to the sewer and water bill that you get every month. And you're going to see it at the bottom. So the goals of the stormwater fees that they now charge is to maintain the water quality, allow the city to comply with federal, state regulation. And our city got into a real problem with federal government a couple of years ago because of this. Golly, Tom, I'm telling you.
Mike, when you have a chance, can you say a little bit more about landscape meters?
Oh, yeah, I'll be happy to. Let me get through this slide right here, and I'll talk a little bit more. As we get into it, I can talk a little bit about the landscape meter and try to help everybody. But what it done, this here, it reduced the flood damage. They're trying to reduce it as they get in there because we've had some real serious flooding in some of the downtown places. But also these retention ponds, and you can go by any of the, especially my subdivision used to have a fairly large one, but any big developments now, they have these retention ponds or detention ponds, and it takes long-term maintenance. As you can see in the bottom corner, they have a real problem right there with this because you'll get trees growing in it, you get sludge in them, and it's creating a real issue for them. So and we were talking a little bit about the development and impacts on the water cycle. Look how it used to be when we had just forest. You would get 10% runoff and 50% would go down into the infiltration into the soil. And so what happened is the rest of the people say, oh, that's only 60%. Yeah, you're correct. The rest of it was transpiration and went up through and evaporated through the trees, evaporates out, after the rainfall. Now with the cities that we have 55% runoff and only 15% that gets into the soil. And this is especially in a downtown area. It could be even less if they don't have a way to any kind of greenery or green structures there. So the perfect ideal rain garden soil is going to be 50 to 60% sand, 20 to 30% topsoil, compost, 20 to 30% peat moss. No more than 10% should be clay. Clay holds the water in, but it can also compact and create a problem, not allowing it to go in there. So with that, you got to just be a little bit careful. The nutrient content of the compost, actually the lower concentrations are preferred by the soil because you're going to look at using native plants and shrubs and things that are there. And you don't want to have a heavy, like if you got a flower bed in there, maybe you want to have a little bit more of the phosphorus and potassium in there to help that plant be established and also help it bloom. So, you make it, the homeowner's a little bit different. The bigger they are, a lot of them only want to use shrubs. Now the plants, a wide variety of plants can be used, size, texture, color, to make an interesting rain garden. You can use a combination of everything. You can use, it doesn't really matter. I used to enjoy having the native plants and seeing them around there because what happens is the rain garden plants, and hey, Tom, I think I figured out what's wrong. I think this thing's actually on the timer.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I see it. It only gives me so long before it does. I really didn't want to stop it to go through.
Yeah.
So if y'all just bear with me on this thing. So the rain garden, it can be designed to fit all concentrations. The mixed trees, shrubs, perennials, ornamental grasses, turf grasses. There are bioswales that run through yards that have zoysia, Bermuda, and because those are turf type grasses, you can use fescues, but they're more of a clump type, and they don't hold up as well because they feed straight down. The plants must be wet and drought tolerant. You want tougher plants. And one of the ones that really surprised me is rudbeckia. I can't tell you, it sat in water in my rain garden, but it was still bloom and bloom and bloom. So this right here is looking at the food bank that we had. So when a food bank's there, this was the original rain garden there. And those of you worked that, and I appreciate Katie sending me some photos. And so this is how it started. By the way, over that, she hated those flag iris that are over to the side, but they loved it there. And they were once they got established, they would run everywhere. And if you want something that soaks up water, they will soak up water because they'll sit there and you think they look terrible, but when it gets dry, they just jump right back out. So this was looking the other way. We'd plant the whole area. Now what we did, we created that all along this old stream bed. That it was a drainage ditch. They put it out there along on the outside. This was the initial thought. We had master gardeners go out there and design it. We put different plants in it that were donated from different people. And it did exactly what we wanted to. It held the water back up in there. If you've been out there lately, this is what it looks like. So it still holds the water in there. It still has some of it, but with Katie's help and a little bit from Mother Nature, it changes, move things around along the outside, and still has that nice beauty to it because it does what it's supposed to. It holds the water back and then disperses it. And as you can see, you put along the banks, you can put different flowers. You got zinnias here, you got black-eyed Susans that are there, you got daylilies on the far side. So it's a combination of both. And if you look at it, it makes it much, much better. So the way I get, and we were talking, and I'll talk more about pictures on this, and we'll have some more photos here. But you wanted to ask me about the irrigation meter, and so what it does is you can make an application for an irrigation meter. They will come out. The city will make the tap onto the line. You pay them to come out there. You know, some people tap it off the other line before it gets there. If it's a large enough line, you can tap it before it gets into your regular meter. But they set it in there, and then you pay for that meter to go in the ground for irrigation and then run your irrigation system from it. And what it does, they'll read that meter at the same time that they do. And nowadays, a lot of them are using electronic. So it automatically goes in. But what that does, you only pay for the water. You get no sewer fee on top of that. And the sewer fee that goes through your water, when you water out of just straight out of your hose bib off the side of your house, if you don't have an irrigation meter, you're paying 3 times the amount for that because your sewer bill is double what your water bill is. So say you get a $40 water bill, it's typically $40. And you know, that's probably during the summer, but you get $40, multiply that 2 more times. So you're paying $120 a month for your water. So always look at your bill, and that makes the difference. But the main thing is, excuse me, that you can ask the city or your water district to come out, and you want to put a water meter in, they can tap off, and so they'll either tap in the street or they'll tap it right there at right in front of your meter and allow you to set you an irrigation meter on your property. Does that, and like I said, does that help everybody sort of understand how that works? Susan, did you get any more questions about it? Did I lose her?
Something about oh, just somebody mentioned rain barrels for collecting we're
Yeah.
good there. Now, is just out of curiosity, is a meter something that you can get? Do you have to be in the city of Chattanooga?
No, it's your different water systems. Each
Oh,
one of
okay.
them.
So you
Yeah,
call the
every
water company.
water district. We were in Hickson, so we had the Hickson water district, and so we it was a little bit different. And so the other if you want that, just contact them and say I want to get an irrigation meter. Now the
Mhm.
city is more prone to that. Like if you're in a county, a lot of times. I don't know if I haven't really looked at that lately as if they charge that fee or not.
It's not cheap though, isn't it, Mike? Isn't it?
You talking about the meter?
Yeah.
Typically, my irrigation meter, when I initially got it, now I got to tell you, the people that were there had already installed the meter there. The tap, I think now is like $250, $300, but then you pay $50 to get the meter set, and then of course you run your irrigation system. Or some people actually off that irrigation meter, if they don't want to run an irrigation system or don't have the time, they'll actually put a hose bib there and run the water off of it to their yard, whatever they want to do. So if you're looking, say for a $500 investment that you do a one-time deal and you don't have to worry, eventually it will pay for itself. So that's what you have to look at. So, and then Susan, the question on the rain barrels, now, as far as now understand on a house that's 2,000 square feet. Now, if you got one bigger, you're going to get more water. So say it's 2,000 square feet, that'd be an area, like, say, 20, say 10, for the sake of it, 10 by 200 or 100 by 20, whatever, but 2,000 square feet, you're going to get around 650 gallons of water in a quarter-inch rainfall. How fast is that rain barrel going to fill up? So what a lot of people will do is, like in the rain barrel classes, you can make a series of rain barrels where you can catch 100, 150. And then if you're lucky enough, there used to be a square bin that you could get. Some people got it from TVA that actually would hold nearly 500 gallons. So that one was actually a pretty nice one. You could tap it, and it had a polyethylene tank. You put you could take, and some people put a little pump in it where you could pump the water out. So it was pretty good. But just consider that when you're doing rain barrels, just how fast that thing will fill up. Now, one of the things that I always talk about is look around what we have here in natural areas. And a lot of you know where this is, and I referred to it in my talks. This is Pigeon Pocket. It's early spring. Mother Nature, we did not plant a thing here. Mother Nature did it all. You got bluebells and celandine poppies back in there. Then you get May apples that are in there. There's ferns that will pop their heads back in here. Moss goes in here. And this is in a wet area. Now you got to understand, there are trees, a lot of shrubbery that's in here, but it makes it a beautiful place when you naturalize an area and use the natives. There's the May apples. They'll pop up after, during that, and you'll see them back in there. And like I tell everybody, a wildflower is great where it belongs, but if it shows up in your lawn, it's a weed. So it just lost its way. So, and here's the celandine poppies. They're absolutely wonderful. They bloom at the same time as bluebells. They'll grow in with ferns. They look a lot. The leaf looks a lot like a fern. You can put them in with hostas and just naturalize the area, and they'll take wet feet like hostas will. Now, look at the natural water flow. This is actually how our yard was when we first got. And I would take, and there's a ditch over to it, right in the middle, over to the left-hand side. You see the river rock that runs through it. What that was where the air conditioner would actually run water constantly during the summer. And I created an area through there where it would drain down to this stream. So all the water in here would come over. And I had two downspouts on this side of the house. And what I did with one of them, I caught the drain over there and drained it into a bog garden. And I'll show you a bog too. It's absolutely one of the great things that you can do. But this entire area is a rain garden. It looks like a stream. Well, watch what happens. I put a bog down at the bottom of it, and this thing actually has 3 tiers through it. Stephanie wanted to take and have have a little water feature in there. So right in the middle of this thing, there are 3 little copper, it's a pump in the middle of it that recirculates water. So we did the bog and built it, and all the bog is it's about 18 to 2 feet deep. And then in the bottom of it, I put a layer of sand. And at the top layer of that sand, I took the liner that I cut slits in it. So what happens is I mix the peat moss and sand on the top. That's all it is. And then the topsoil it'll eventually fill in. But the peat moss and the sand allows the plants to grow down, and the water set in that bottom 4 inches. So when it would fill up with water, eventually the water would go down. Where I cut the liner in there, it would hit the sand. Sand stayed wet all the time because it had a liner under it, and it was 4 inches deep. So where the slits were at the top, the water would run out, the bog would get dry at the top, and it would run the water off. So that thing was around about, I guess, probably 8, 9 foot around in that area. And so it would hold quite a bit of water as it ran off and would seep into the soil. And you see the Monarda back behind it, that's the red. And then I've got miscanthus and fountain grass around through there. I've got bog sage, which is over to the right back behind there. And then I had passion vine that grew up that natural little arbor there. So you can put, as it flows through there, you can change. And as it went towards the tree in the back, you'll see hostas, ferns, and everything running in the back. So this is a way you can take and use it to your advantage. And by the way, there are some Dutch iris and so there you'll see in the very back over there, look behind the arbor, and you'll see Joe Pye weed in there. So you can see how wet this area is. Now this is what it looks like during the winter from the other way. And if you look in the bog in there, I actually had pitcher plants in there, which kids love, and it has a weird looking bloom with it, but it likes it in the bog area. It will grow here. In the summer, I would put a few Venus flytraps in there. In our area, for some reason, they don't do very well. In South Carolina, they do. But as this thing ran through here, it gives it, you can see the bones of it, but it still would hold the water back even during the winter without the plants being there. Now, this is the area looking from the side, and I had on the south side of this, around the edge, there are 4 different types of Monarda that are in there in that area right over to the left. There's a Jack maple in there, and you'll see the rutabaga in there. I got some Joe Pye weed in here, and I have native milkweed in the back of this too. So in this entire area, it created a nice area. Even when the water would run through, I had to water less, and that's what you're after. In these areas, to make them beautiful, and if you do the right soil mixture and create the right area, you don't have to worry so much about it. And this is a picture from down the downside. And it's, as you can see, it even when it dries up, it still looks nice. And that's what you're after. Now, this is the area back behind there. And I really created another area. I extended this on out, and I'm not sure if I've got a picture. I'm hoping I do. And what I did, I bridged across the bottom of this and put 2 4-inch pipe through here and created a small dam where it ran, instead of letting the water run off as a sheet flow through here, I made it go through the 2 4-inch pipes with the little dam there, and then I took and put a soil bridge over it and put hostas on top of it, so you never even saw it. As you can see in the back of this, right next to this is the deeper shade, more hostas. I have stilby in there. We have goat's beard in there. There's on the other side of the path there was beauty berries, and then the tree at the end was a water oak, and so it really liked it in there. And of course, I had my compost pile back in the back, which Bud Hines always had come over and turn it. Look how wet this is. If you look in here, you've got jewelweed over to the left. Jewelweed is found on the banks of rivers around here. It's a native plant. Hummingbirds absolutely love it. But I can tell you, we didn't think we had any jewelweed. We bought 2 ugly looking plants from Reflection Writing. It was the mother of millions, because I'd go through there and have to pull them out because they get so heavily. But the hummingbirds love it so much that they'll go to the jewelweed. And jewelweed is really strange, because what it'll be, one day you'll have the male portion in there, and then it'll get pollinated, and then it'll have the female portion. So it has both sex organs in with that one plant. but they would go to it so much, they would actually get a little crystal spot on the top of their head by going to the jewelweed. And then over to the right, like I said, you can see the wetness in there. The Joe Pye weed, you can see how tall it grew. It's in back of the little bluebird feeder that's there. So it was above the top of that. So it likes it a little bit wet. And then of course, I have the elephant ear just there to the right-hand side. And it's the area that you create, this created a background and a backdrop for all the butterfly garden that Stephanie and I had on that side. Let's see what I do here. Now this one right here, I show this one. We get another question. Okay. This one right here was an old garden. You have to understand it was on the side of a hill, and I put this one in here because to me it was one of the most beautiful displays of a rain garden I've ever seen. They took this hill that was just chert rock, they terraced it off above there, and they put there's a dogwood in the middle, you got hostas in the middle, they got ferns in the back. They created an area over in the back. They've got a table setting in there. They created a patio, and they redirected the water. It would run across through here when it rains real hard and into the rip-rap stream here. And they had the perfect flow for this. So if it comes off and runs into one location, you can hold it back. Used to, it would just sheet drain. It had big rills or cuts in the soil. They had before and after pictures. And I wish I got a before picture, but they've taken an area that's just ugly as sin and made it just one of the most beautiful things that you can have. Now, we did this several years ago at the county fair. We really concentrated on doing rain gardens and doing how you can hold it. We had a living roof on top, and we just put flats up there, but you can actually plant it with different plants. Now, one of the things that they found is that you have to have the right plants, right mixture, because our summers are hot, dry. So a lot of plants that live in deserts do very well on a living roof. And you can see the two different types of rain barrel. One's a whiskey barrel and one's a commercial barrel. And we use rain chains on both sides. And so it drops into that barrel. Now we recycled it, but you can see that at the bottom is your connection, and you set it up off the ground to give you a little bit of head pressure. And so you can use the water from the rain barrels to me, it's light watering around a lot of your plants. Now, if you do a combination of all of them and you run it through there, then it works out really, really good, because that holds your water and allows you to use it at a later time. Now, one of the things I will tell you, if you use rain barrels, make sure you do have a cover or a screen or something on top of it, because like if you leave them open, then the mosquitoes will have a tendency to get in there, and there's a lot of screens that you can get to sort of filter that out. Now, this was the pond that was in the back, and I told you that when we designed this, we really didn't design it for that. As you can see, there's water sitting on top of it, but when it rained really, really hard, the water would actually fill the pond. And during the summer, I very, very rarely had to fill the pond up, even during the driest times, because if I got a thunderstorm, it'd run the water and fill the pond up. And back over, right underneath that weeping pine tree in the back, I had to put a drain, an outfall in there, because the pond would fill up, it'd get above my skimmer, and I'd have all kinds of issues running over the top of the rocks. So the plants that you plant around the area, you can have your own little pond like this, or maybe a nice little area that comes off the side of a hill, and you berm it up, take the dirt you dig out, and berm it up around it. And it may only be an area that gets there when you get heavy rainfall, but it's something that you can actually use, because if you do it right, it creates the right area. Now on this one, this is a Tennessee rain garden. Hey, Tom, I may switch over to another PowerPoint I have, if you don't mind, because I wanted to show them.
Yeah, it's your call. All you got to do is drop this one down and put the other one.
Okay, well, I've got a few more on this one, but I wanted to show them the makeup of a rain garden since we have the time, because that way it'll give them some ideas of what they can do in their yard. But this garden here was basically Chattanooga's first rain garden. We built it not knowing that, but what we did, we diverted, there's two drains, one on the other side where we were standing and one on this side. And what we did, we diverted all the water to make it flow around and infiltrate this and then drop down in there. Now this was, I'd say this was probably, we've already lost one of the good, probably about 6th or 7th year of the garden. If you haven't been down there, this year has been the best year. I mean, as far as the plants. Now, I got to tell you, the binder weed that's down there, Tom was down there with me a few weeks ago. It's got a mind of its own. So we end up tearing that morning glory vines out every time I go in there. And if I get a chance tomorrow, I'm going to slip down early morning and go down there and do a little weeding. I call it Zen weeding because it relieves stress. But that's what it looked like. Now, this is some pictures we took just a few weeks ago, and this is how it looks now. It is a whole lot fuller. Mother Nature has moved plants around. We've had to add some new plants because some of them get tossed. We use, I need to relabel some of it because we've added some new plants. But as you can see that we put some daylilies in there from Lee Pickles, donated them. And they just really, they fill in a blank spot that's in there, and we'll cut them back. And now the zinnias have popped up and they are everywhere. So as you look at this, there's people always ask me about this. So you look down the path, and by the way, if you want to know what binder weed is, look at the picture to the right. Look right, the little heart-shaped vine that's down there at the bottom. That's binder weed, and it will wrap itself around and grow everywhere. And anytime y'all go work with me down to the garden, you will get a few education hours, even though you're getting volunteer hours to help, because I'll teach you. I actually teach a propagation class while I'm there, or give you a little bit of education on weeds. But over to the left, we have that lavender Province. It has been there since the garden was done. It's already bloomed twice this year. Kids and people come by and just want to rub their hands through it. It smells really good. And back of that is a Brazilian verbena. That's the other tall purple. So as the perennials go in and out during the summer, we do have annuals there to sort of fill in. And this is the other side of the garden. If you look, I cleaned the rock earlier this year. The water flows around the garden, comes off the hill, and actually will finally drop into the storm drain, which is right there under where we have some canna lilies. Tom planted those last year sort of as a backdrop. And this year they're absolutely beautiful because they're a variegated canna. The bloom to me is insignificant because of the way it is. Over to the left, I've got columbine that are in there. And then the right-hand side of the one on the right, we have swamp milkweed, and it will bloom. Of course, we have the purple coneflower, which butterflies, bees. We get bees from over at Discovery Museum. They'll fly over here, and I have a butterfly bush that's in the back. And so what we do with this, if you're trying to make the best of it, and I'm just going to, Tom, this is sort of the end of this one, but I wanted to run through it. Make the best of what you got in your yard. And what I'm going to do now is, there's a couple of things. By the way, this is the real reason I do conservation. I've got 10 grandkids now. So yeah, these are my oldest ones. So it's really good. And that's the next generation that's coming up. And I wanted to give a little plug here on the Tennessee. This is Yards in the Neighborhood, but it's called Smart Yards now. Tom, if you want to chime in a little bit, because what I've got is just some.
Mike, can I ask you a question?
Yep.
In the rain garden, is there anything that self-seeds or that pops up that you didn't plant? I mean, when you said the zinnias, I don't know that they self-seed, but
yes, they do.
They do. So they come up from where you planted them before, or just from last
what
year?
you want to do on if you're using some annuals like that, I can go through and deadhead, and that's what I'll do a little bit tomorrow, because if you deadhead, drop seed pods off there, they'll dry out, and I get new, and sometimes I get sports in there, which I'll get half of one, half of the other, and you can't actually plan that, but it's interesting to see how Mother Nature reseeds stuff in there. I actually have a butterfly bush, a small one I found this year from where it dropped seed last year, and you get it from the Brazilian verbena. It'll drop seed, and I'll find it, and what I do is I'll take it and transplant it and put it back in the location of where it is. Now, I can tell you the passion vine will show up where it wants to go. We planted it on the trellis, and it's run all the way on the other side. I just let it grow up. If it wants to grow there, we have swamp milkweed. We have the Helianthus, which is a swamp sunflower. And all those, a lot of the native plants I bought at Reflection Riding, or I had some master gardeners give. If you look in the middle of that, there were a black and blue salvias in there. It started from 4 pods from our yard. And now we got an area. Anytime you're down there and want some black and blue salvia, take all you want. You're not going to hurt it.
I have a question about passion vine. Do they bloom every year or every other year? Because I had one and it bloomed like crazy one year and then not the next year.
Well, what happens is on that, it was supposed to bloom every year because a lot of times it'll just die back. And we found that it runners underneath the ground, and we tried to dig it up, move it, and I've sort of given up on it. What we finally put on the trellis, we put out there in this garden, we took and put the coral honeysuckle out there, and it does really good. And I've put a couple of the I thought about putting a trumpet vine, but sometimes they'll get a little bit invasive. But I enjoy having the vines as a background because that trellis that we have there, Jeff Jared built and put it. He put it in place and got a design for it, so it sort of has the waves of the river.
That's great. Thanks.
Okay. But this is what you want to do, the smart yards, Tom's, and I want you to sort of chime in a little bit on this since I've got it here at the end.
Right. Yeah. The Smart Yards class is basically trying to get more people involved with converting some of their yard or part of their yard into a rain garden. And so it's a 2-night class that we've had. We didn't have it this year because of COVID, but we've had it in the past, and we could probably set it up pretty easily the same way.
Is that still the same thing, Tom? Is it still 35 or 50 per household?
No,
did you bump that? We had to bump that up, didn't we?
10 or 15. It's not.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Especially that.
Yeah, because when we started it, we were giving rain gauge test kits, a lot of different things to everybody. And I think we still give quite a bit of that away too, don't we?
The state supplied that, or the university supplied it. So if we do, well, that was sort of free. We were trying to make it into a little bit of a money maker, but then we decided that not so much, and just
I'm going to switch over, Tom. Go ahead and talk a little bit more about that while I'm trying to get this up.
Yeah, and so basically it starts with soil, like all gardening does. Make your soil right for doing this kind of thing. And then we get into water issues, mulching, just a lot of, is anybody in this group taking that class? We usually get about 15 or 20 that take the class, and they get a certificate and even a little sign from the university that says that they're a smart yard, which is kind of a cool little thing to show off to your neighbors. We might get that going because it's just a 2-night thing, and Mike teaches part of it. I teach some, and we get some of the water quality folks from the city or the county to come and teach their part too. So I think it's a 6-hour class, 2 nights, 3 hours each, and we go through it. We might make it into 3 days. That way it wouldn't be such a long time on the video, but I think we can do it by Zoom. I think it'd be a good class to do.
And that's fine.
If anybody's interested, just put that in the chat and we'll get back in touch some way.
What I'm going to do, I'm going to go through this, and anybody that has questions, please, ask, because what I'm trying to do is give you a little bit of background on this. This is more the 2-hour talk I give, and we get through part of it, but I want to get to certain things in this that will help you in your yard, because this is more on the commercial end that I talk about, but it's got a little more graphs that show how the transpiration and the impervious areas really have changed over the years through here. And so what I'm looking for in this particular one, this is what I was trying to get at as far as our runoff. I mean, you see construction sites, and I'm in that, where they're really drilling down on us now about any kind of runoff, making us whole ponds and stuff. I'm doing one, if you go by there, I'm actually building a project out off of corner of Mountain Creek and Signal Mountain. And they required us to have 3 different ponds for that particular site. And it's where an old gas station was. I've had all kinds of ear problems to it. Well, let me go back to this. There's a graph that I really want to have, Tom, that in this, let me drill down this a little bit. There's down through here, it really sort of shows, because this had a lot more commercial. Now, on this down here at the bottom, this is what I'm getting to. If you look, you're looking for site selection. Let me get to this. I'll start a little bit from here. If you look at this right here, you want to look at site selection, where the drain goes. Think of the drain as a dry stream bed in dry times. Look at avoid foundations if you can. Now, if you've got a foundation place that's really bad, you can go in there. There's certain things you can do to your foundation to waterproof and do things like that. You could have it against the house as a wall if you want to do that. Watch septic system, watch well heads, look for areas. Do not get into where your utility lines run. Avoid the disturbance of existing trees if all possible. Look at the areas you have available and understand the soil that you have in your yard if you're going to have to maintain it or change it. Now, as you look, this is sort of a subdivision right here, and it's got a plan without bioretention. Then look at the plan over here on the other side. They'll put bioretention in their yard. You can see the little striped areas of where they added it to everybody's yard. So you can pick an area out in your yard that maybe you want to do. And that's what they've done with this particular subdivision. They've designed it in to help hold the water so they don't have to have a big retention pond in a subdivision. So the other consideration you have is bioswale. Do you want a rain garden? Or a bioswale is just an area that you plant like grass, wildflowers, something that you don't have to really maintain, maybe mow, and look at the depth of swale or the rain garden. Soil type, under drain if needed. And that's why really reason I want to do this. And then there's thing, it's called a bypass weir. And what that is when that rain garden fills up so much, you need a place for that water to run off. So you're going to have a small, they call it a weir. It's either rock, a pipe, or something where it can run off. Now, I'm going to sort of skip this. This is pretty neat. By the way, Tom, you know where this is?
Yeah, I think I do.
Any of you ever been to
Still
Tom's
going
house?
strong.
Yeah. Do what?
It's still going strong. It's full of canna. I got a Japanese maple in there.
This is Mr. Stebbins' rain garden area. And so I went down there when he started this, and this is how you actually start. He took the dirt that was right here, mounted it up on that other side, and it creates an area that can hold the water coming off his driveway. And that's really a great thing to have, because he structured it properly to hold the water. And so this is looking, oh, by the way, Tom, I'm sure this whole thing has changed since that, because I think
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. That's
so. Tom, I need to get some updated shots. I told Tom eventually him and Devereaux need to be on the garden tour.
we're working on it.
I know but the way they're structuring this was the perfect place to put this, because he got good water drainage on this side, didn't have to worry about it. And it's really, with all the rain we had, I'm sure it's self-sustaining.
It is.
Now, this is a bigger one. This is another master gardener, and some of you, if you've been around long enough, this was the Smolenski's yard that was out in Red Bank. They decided to do a rain garden, and it was a pretty good size one. They spent the time, effort to design how where the water runoff came into this area, and it turned out to be really, really nice. By the way, I showed you the rain garden over there. This is how we started the rain garden over at the food bank. We started by grading that swale down through there to try to, we figured out where the water would run, and we ran it down to it. Now, the lessons that you learn during that is you do the analysis, take a look at it. The good part about it is you got time on your hands. So if you make a mistake in your grading, so you get an area standard, you can always correct that. But always look in there that you don't really want a compacted soil into those specific areas. So and let me skip over again, Tom, because I'm just trying to get through this because I use a lot of the same slides.
It's no problem.
Okay. Let me go down. I want to go down to the bottom of this. Because on this right here, I more get into the plants. Let me look right here. Right here, I think it is. Yeah. So if you're looking at this right here, these are some areas that, like on bioswales we were talking about, look to the right-hand side. This was more a commercial drainage. What they did here is they were draining parking lots off into this area, and they had an overflow drain, which is up here. You put it, 2 to 4 inches up. So if it rains really hard, it dumps into it and then falls a pipe and runs out. So you look at the vegetated swell goes through there, and I was talking about an under drain. Look at the bottom detail cross section. You'll see a pipe underneath this. Well, what happens, that water will drain in there, and this soil is pervious soil, so the water drains through there, and eventually if any water gets through all this soil, it will hit that pipe there and then drain on off. So the water doesn't stand in that area. And that's the way you want to create this, is it like on Tom's cross section there in the bottom of his, if he had to, you could run a drain out in the location in there. It would actually filter in, or he would create an outfall where the water would run over the tops. This site selection here would be perfect. You see the drain over to the left-hand side? You dig this area, you would have out right here. You could put an under drain in the middle of this area into that drain in the soil, so the water would drain to it. If it rained really hard, it'd run over the top of the berm and into that storm drain. So you're looking for things like this. Now this is more of a commercial. They took over to the right-hand side. Some of you know where this is. It's in Hickson, right in front of the big shopping center, and I think there's restaurants there. But I think that's Synovus Bank that's right there in that background. But they chose to have a retention pond, and the entire area could have been used as a bioswale. So when you're looking at what you want to do, that's the area that you're actually looking at. I was going to try to get into a little bit more. I think this is it right here. This is one that's against a foundation. And that's what I wanted to show you here. If you are considering a foundation underneath this, that area where the wall is would have to be waterproofed up against there in a foundation. And then they drop down in, and there's the planting, soil mix, sand, leaf compost, topsoil. They put a fabric with a rock around it. It's sort of like building, if you've ever done a septic system in your yard and put a field lines in, that's what that is. It's just a perforated pipe down in the bottom there that allows the water to run into and finally run off. And if you look up the top of this, they have an overflow structure there. So it gives you the depth. They've got the pond depth's 9 inches. They got a 3-inch layer of mulch in the bottom of it. And so it allows for an overflow inlet at the far end. So if it rains really hard, it will actually dump into that real quick, but it will still hold the water and eventually filter out. And this is the percolation rate. If you've ever dug a hole, if it takes, for good bioswales and stuff, you want to be less than 60 minutes per inch when it rains for that water to actually drain off. So it's one of those things that you're looking at. You're trying to look at the different rates that you have in the yard. And I'm trying to get down. Yep. Here's the next one. This one here, they've done the pond. They've been the bioswale. They did their, and what they do here, they just took the soil out of the middle of this. They bermed it over to this side. They sort of had a little bit of slope anyway. So they took the slope in their yard and they bermed it up on one side. Then they took and they put a mixture of soil in there. So the pond depth here is 6 to 12 inches, and they've got an overflow structure right there. They call it a beehive, which is really just a grate that sits on top of it. And so instead of having an outfall that would go over the other side like Tom would on his, this one, excuse me, would actually run into this structure, drop down in there, and that pipe would fill up to 18 inches before it would run out of that drain. So It's really good. It's a non-perforated overflow pipe that they have in this one. So this one is like a piece of PVC that runs out to a drain structure and then drops out. Now, some of you may want to take and put a perforated pipe, which will allow the water to run out and then filter into your garden. And that's what I like. I like the idea of having that perforated pipe in there because I'm a gardener. If I can allow that water to infiltrate into my soil, that's that much less I have to actually worry about watering my plants. So, you know, it's personal preference. They did the same thing. They put 2 or 3 inches. They put plants in the middle of it. I'll try to hopefully have enough time to show you some of the plants and stuff. And look at this. This is what I did on my house. See where the downspouts drain off of this? It comes over, and instead of a stream that there, you could create a natural stream that comes off of there, sort of like I did with my down the side of my yard for my, you know, maybe you've got a, like I had a HVAC unit there that during the summer it drains water constantly, but you create a ditch through this area, and you can actually landscape along the outside of that. Then the bottom of this, you have your drop-in area, or maybe, you know, you only have your rain garden down on this end, and you have the overflow structure down in this right there at the top. And at the bottom of there it is. There's your drain. At the very bottom, it says perforated pipe to outlet. So you can either use, a perforated pipe, you can use a PVC pipe if you want to run the water to some other location. But then you have the different plants, native plants, natural plants. You naturalize the area. It takes that ugly looking drainage area that used to come off that downspout and create ruts in your yard. It makes it into a beautiful landscape, nice area. Look how they did this one. That one's pretty interesting. All they have is just some rocks, a little stream right there, runs through it. They've got it running through a planter bed, but you don't see an ugly rut. It doesn't stay, you know, and that's what happens. Typically people will just put splash blocks up underneath that. Water will run out the end and it still creates a rut in the yard. But this one creates a nice natural area coming off from that downspout. And here's an option if you have really bad soils. So basically the water slopes down into that area. You can, there's the flow point. You look at where the water will actually run over, and over to the right-hand side, they have planting material in it. And that area in the bottom is how much water we get in there. So you would have to have plants in there that absolutely love to have wet feet from time to time. I try not to put any trees in the middle of the pond because what it'll eventually do, if you put trees in there, the roots will upset that planting bed. And if you use smaller trees around the perimeter like dogwoods, redbuds, some smaller ornamental trees, the Japanese maple, they'll do very well on that. They like the water around the bottom. That planting soil mixture is in the bottom. And this one they actually put the geofabric around this to help that let that go through there to hold the mixture in. And it'll keep some of the roots and other stuff you don't want in that planting mix from infiltrating from the outside. Now this is one that you may want to look at. This is just a little small area. And if you look at what they did, where those step stones are over to that down at the bottom, it says flat step stone. Well, they got stepping stones to sort of step down in this thing, but right underneath that is actually the outfall for this and where the under drain runs. So they've got a under drain run from basically the Joe Pye weed through this down to underneath this rock. And so they took the dirt in the middle of this, they bermed it around the outside, and they put some stones in this. And if I was there, and I know Stephanie would do it, she'd always put some kind of seating there where you could sort of go down here because you got cardinal flower, you got a little bowl in the middle right there for maybe the birds or the butterflies would come and perch. You got Joe Pye weed, you got some larch in this one, litrus on the upper side, monarda down where the water is, and the sedge down in here. And then you have coreopsis and asters up along the berm, and then some little blue stem grass that's up on this side. So you can use a combination to make this area look really, really nice. And I know everybody has at least one spot there. Look at this one. And that's why I wanted to talk about different designs. You can do anything you want to do. They took this one, they have a grassy area, and down in the bottom of this thing, down in towards it where it makes the pinnacle, this thing circles downward. So in the middle of this, that green area all in there is actually grass, is like a type of grass. And underneath that is the rain garden for the swell in it. They've actually improved that in the middle, and the water drains through there into the under drain on the bottom side. All around the perimeter, they use shrubs and plants to create this. To me, it's a great architectural feature. It's a larger garden. You could probably make it as large or smaller, but it gives you a nice idea of what you can take and do in your yard and create. And you don't necessarily have to have all plants. You can use grass in there. And the overflow structure that for this particular one is right up underneath where those shrubs are at the very bottom right there. So it runs out, and then it runs to a storm drain out at the street, which was pretty neat. I thought they did a nice idea on this one. So this is the other thing I wanted to look at. And I wanted to look a little bit at the plants. The plants itself are, you can use a wide variety, texture, size, color. It can be designed, you can actually use, like I said, grass, mixture of trees and shrubs. And so, but all I want to say is if you have where you put them in water, make sure they're pretty tough. So if you look through here, you want to look at the diversity, look at the soil conditions. If you do happen to get a little bit too much clay in there, you know, it's not going to hurt anything. It just helps. It'll hold the water a little bit longer. When it's wet, it'll dry out a little bit more later. But your whole interest is to create interest in a bad area, be able to hold the water. And also you're going to create, just remember when you do this, you're going to create a brand new habitat for all kinds of stuff. Look at this right here. This is different rain garden plants that are actually in this garden here. It shows you a map of where you stand. They've got a maple tree in this thing, and they've created a garden A and a garden B, so they have one on either side. So as you went through this, you could actually walk up to this, and you got a couple of different ones. But you got ferns, you have phlox in this, lytras, and these are a lot of these plants are native that are in there. If you've grown ironweed, which is up there number 7, it's one of the great plants. It and Joe Pye weed bloom later in the year. They put crocus in this thing. And you can put, in our garden that we have down there, and they've been there since day one, we've got grape hyacinths that come up, and it has a sea of blue early in the spring, and they keep spreading. I keep digging them up. They keep moving. And of course, this one has flag iris in it. And then it's got a little magnolia that's in there. So this is really, you can look at the variety of plants and how they put them together. It's all in getting your soil right up front and creating that area. This is the flag iris that I had in the back that's there. Look how tall that gets. That's what I was trying to show. That bluebird house is on an 8-foot pole. These get about 6 foot tall. They do have there's a blue variety and a purple variety, but once you get them, Tom will tell you, they like their spot to go through. This was the entrance to our rain garden. I had goldenrod on one side. I had asters, and by the way, people asked me, yes, that is two butterfly bushes that I took and made an arch out of in the middle. I tied them together, and I created a natural arch where you could walk through this garden. Now, this is called a swamp rose. Swamp rose, I found this at a little native place down in Alabama. We took a trip, and Master Gardeners went down to the hydrangea gardens down there, and then we decided to make a side trip, and I found this rose down there, and it loves wet feet. Now, it blooms early. It's a single bloomer, and there's one called the McCarthy rose. I don't know if I've got a picture of it, but it likes it. It's real thorny, and by the way, if you have, I found out if I'd had this when I had teenagers, I would have probably grown it because they couldn't have got out their window because it's so thorny. Now, here's another one. If you've got a garden, you can plant banana trees. These were in my backyard. They actually produce small little bananas. Now, I'll go into that talk some other time, but there's a secret to having bananas. But the bloom on the banana tree, if you've ever gotten it, you can smell it from everywhere. And honeybees absolutely love the bloom because as it blooms, they get in there and it would be covered with honeybees. I thought I had a hive in there off these trees when I first did them. But these are called hardy bananas. And those, you can see how tall they are. That's basically probably 2 seasons I found a way that I could actually do it, and it'll come out from the center of it to make it work. And if somebody has a question about them at the end, Susan, I'll be happy to answer it. And Monarda, this is a mainstay of your garden. You want to look at it. It can be used. It loves wet areas. It loves full sun. There are so many different varieties. There's a native variety that we have in the garden down there. And if you cut these, I found if you cut these off, you will get a second little side bloom to it. Honeybees, hummingbirds, they love this plant, and you can't go wrong with having this part. And like I showed you before, elephant ears, jewelweed, and joe pie weed, all in that area right there. Now this is called a rain garden in a box. And if you've only got that little bitty small area, maybe it's too wet in your yard, maybe you don't want to fool with it. You hate running your mower through it because water sits in there. Look at what they did here. They took the area that's in there, they improved the soil. Now, what they did for the rain structure, they dug down on this particular garden, they dug down about 2 feet on this one. So what they did, they mounded it up in the middle a little bit so that the water stayed in there in the bottom of this thing. It wouldn't run out. And so they put a little overflow right at the top where that little indentation is. There's a little overflow right there that comes out. They create a small little berm around on that side. It will hold the water, but what it does, it will seep down on the bottom of this thing because they dug it so deep, and they filled it full of that soil mixture. But they've got, look at what they got. They got a coneflower in there. They got turtle head. They got Jacob's ladder, wild geranium, lady fern. So this tells on this right here, this would tell you wild ginger, they've got a little bit of shade back in there. And it's not full blown sun because they created a pocket up underneath where their trees were. And they look, because it's got a shade, it's a shade type garden with flowers and ferns. And it blooms and it has the greenery to go with it. So it's absolutely wonderful. You can put it anywhere you want to. Here are trees and shrubs. One of the trees that are in there, anybody, and I'd love to ask this, but you know what that tree is over to the right hand. It's a tulip poplar. It's our native tree. So these are the different trees that do well. I actually had 2 ball cypress in my yard and got knees out of it because it was so wet on one side. But those ball cypress will actually suck up the water that's in and around that area, so it makes it less wet. So you got sweet bay, you got the button bush in there. River birch, be careful with river birch. You want to always make sure you get enough room away from your house so that they can have room to grow. I've seen people plant that little bitty tree up there, and about 10 years later, they wish they had. Here's some wildfire. These are some things. Swamp sunflower. You've got a Louisiana iris. Cardinal flower are great for wet areas. Nice red flower. You got penstemon that's in there. And then you have Stokes aster, giant coneflower, sensitive, all kinds of ferns, sensitive ferns. And I told Tom before some of y'all got on there, I just got back from Maine. I got to walk through some of their, it was a nice native plant area, garden that they had for different. And their Solomon seal gets almost 3 foot tall, and it was still that tall, and it looked great while I was there. And their ferns, 3.5 foot tall. So it was absolutely beautiful. Now these are just some different commercial designs. I want to see, there's one more section I really wanted to show y'all down here towards the bottom, I think. Oh, here it is. I think that's it. And this was just another take on that, on the gardens that I had about how you can do your own. They've dug that out again. They put it on the low side. In order to hide this garden, they put shrubs all along the top bank of this. You can use beautyberry. You could actually use, if you really wanted to hide your rain garden, say you don't want anybody to really see it, you could actually put evergreens on that slope right there, which would sort of shield that off. And so if you just want to have it where it's interspersed and look well, like I said, beautyberries. You could actually, if it's a shade garden on the top of that berm, plant azaleas. Use rhododendrons. They look good early in the spring. You can make this thing have 3 seasons of interest. And then at the bottom of this one, instead of putting an under drain here, all they did, they loosened the soil from the original soil. They let the blended mix go down in that. So it allows for the, and if I'd been them though, down at the bottom of this, where that bottom of that slope is that they dug the berm, I would have probably put an under drain straight across that over to the right, and you would never see it. It would come out in the end of it. So, and that's sort of what they did here. You can see how an under drain works. There's the perforated pipe, comes out, runs to a different location. So the water drops through there. You're slowing it out by your rain garden and running that way. Look at these different, there's so many options. And like I said, I just wanted to go through this one. Look at this rain garden. It's sitting in there. It just finished raining. Did exactly what it's supposed to. The water goes in there, and the under drain is actually over to the right-hand side. This is one we had laid out. I took and I laid it out. They wanted to do one at Red Bank, and I went ahead and laid it out. There's what I laid out. If you look at the before and after, I laid out, this was a big ditch line that they had down there, held water, looked awful. And then I laid it out like this, and just so that it'd have the under drain filtration down to the bottom, and then had them over to the side. So I used a combination of where they didn't have many plants. I used the flag iris in the middle, which they didn't really care because this area was left unattended. I put a couple of trees at the top, used miscanthus in there, and then I used a combination of rutabacia and some of the blanket flower around the outside edges. And this is Smolinski's bed again. See how they've actually took this, they improved their soil, they planted the plants in there. They use a lot of grasses, a lot of native plants in and around their berm there to create the area that they had. And then again, this is the garden that I had down. You look through the rain garden as it starts to grow in on that side. This is a couple of years later after we actually got in there, and it's grown up a little bit more. It's going to change. This is what it does when it rains. See how the water backs up into the area? It actually covers the path. It really doesn't matter because it will drain off, and it runs down through there. And that's what, again, there's coming off the air conditioner. Maybe you've got a downspout over there that you want to create the same feel. And so I created a small little walk path where you can get across the area without getting your feet in there. That's what it looks like from the bottom side when it rains. It backs up through there. Tom was lucky enough, he found me something called permatil, which was a little blue rock. It'll actually break down and improve the soil. But what it does, it makes that stream look like a blue stream when it's dry. Now, looking from the other, I told you I made a bridge to go across that stream later on. If you look underneath the hosta right there where it falls, there are 2 4-inch pipe right there, perforated pipe. So when the water will be funneled in that area, it will back up. But the hosta are growing over the top of the pipe all through there. So you don't really see that there's a dam there to keep the water back up in this area. And by the way, look at the swan over to the right-hand side in the bog. After about 4 years, it got in there, and so I thought it'd be pretty good. I put the swan like it's swimming in the water, and I put the legs in there like it buried another one. So there's the permatil, Tom, that we put in there. It makes that stream bed look like it's, got water in it, even when it doesn't have water. And there are the 2 4-inch pipe underneath that. The hosta haven't grown over the top of it yet, so it gives you a good idea of how that runs through there and dams up. Okay. Now here's the maintenance test. As far as this, I thought this was pretty good. You may have, pruning 1 to 2 times a year. If you've got a bioswale, you may have to mow it, maybe 12 times a year. Mulching, and this all depends upon what you do, the type of plants you put in there, grass, whatever it may be. So the fertilization, when you first do it, that really should be the only time that you have to fertilize your plants. It's just a spot. It's just for the first year to get your plants established. So it's one of the real things. Like I said, this rain garden has actually kept on going, and it's been one of the best things that I've ever done. Okay. All right, let's get some questions.
Because there's quite a few different choices. There's no one size fits all for all this, right, Mike?
No, that's the good part about this, the way this thing is set up. You can use shade, partial shade, full sun, and there's so many variety of plants. You can use a combination of native or exotic, either one. And that's what makes this wonderful, because like you said, you can tailor this to fit what your needs are in your yard.
if you have an area that sort of gets flooded, would you put the drain in first or berm it up first?
Well, what you're going to do, if it's in a grassy area, I take and lay it out first. Take it and look where your water would drain onto the low side. Then you could take either a side cutter, or if you're real crazy, go out there in a mattock, dig out the grass. Then you want to do the soil improvement. As you do that, you can dig this dirt out in that area and lay it up on top. But if you've already got a low area, muddy area in the area, you take that out, do the soil improvement. Maybe you want to lift that up just a little bit more with the soil, get you some more soil to put in there. And it really will help out that entire area. But if you can possibly put an under drain in there and drain it over to someplace where a ditch line is. I had somebody take and put a perforated pipe in there about 60 feet. They took a trencher, took it to that area right there, then created a rain garden after they got that pipe over there, because they drained it over into an existing ditch line they had on the side of their yard. And it worked out really good.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking, I have a place actually, I was thinking of putting a drain or a ditch line and run the water to a place where I want to plant a tree, to a place where it might not be as wet. You know what I'm saying? A drier area. Can you do that?
Yeah, it works really good. And that's what I'm saying with the perforated pipe. I like using the water that comes out of there. So if you can get a perforated pipe, I had one that was only about 3 inches under the ground because it was such a low depressed area, but I ran it over into where the bog garden is, and it was just, but when that water hit into that bog garden, it would put the water in the bog garden, plus it would drain my wet area over to the far side, and it worked out really good.
I have a question. Oh,
You're on, Sandy.
okay. We're building a home out in the country, and we've already put in. We're planning a rain garden, but we've already put in a pretty long ditch to the wet area. But I noticed above it, we have a spring that goes to town, especially in the winter and in the spring. But I don't want to try to, I just want to divert it, I think. I don't want to put a pipe in, or what would you do?
So is it a wet weather spring?
Well, it's even now, so it's pretty dry out right now.
Yeah.
For everything else. That's still, and there's a lot of grasses, native grasses that are growing up right out. Ferns are over in that area, so you can kind of tell that it's pretty wet. I like the idea of just having ferns around it, but I don't know.
Yeah, and one of the things you can do, and it depends on what you want to do. A lot of ferns, if you look, wood ferns for our area, they're a mat type fern, and they actually will spread. They make a nice low ground cover. And if you get a little bit of shade in that area, it'll do real well. But if it's in full sun, they might get a little burnt edge this time of year. Now, always remember when you're doing a rain garden, the bluer the hosta, the greener the hosta, the deeper it likes the shade. So there are certain little hostas that you get that will take some sun. There's one called Sun Power. It's like a lime color. And if you use a combination of that, if it gets just a little bit of shade late afternoon, they're going to get the burnt tips this time of year. Hostas will, if they catch any sun at all, because it's so hot. But they do like wet feet. The ferns like wet feet. And you'll be surprised. If you want to naturalize that area, there's so many different grasses, and I like the idea of the ferns and hostas together. They just make a nice combination.
Yeah, they do. There's one also called guacamole that I have it's actually in my front yard, which is sunny, and they don't get burnt. They just sort of fade out a little, but they're huge.
Yeah,
they're absolutely huge.
Yeah, the idea of ferns and hosta in that area, I think, do well.
Yeah, that's really pretty.
Okay.
Yeah, Mike, do you have to use a pipe underneath a rain garden because you've got a natural slope? Do you have to put a perforated pipe in?
It's not necessary. The only reason that I would put one in, if you put it in the bottom of it, you put the perforated pipe in there. So if the water fills up, you don't want that water to stand more than 48 hours. You know, unless you're like me, we had a little bit of standing water because of the water feature we had out there. It's not necessary. If you can get good percolation into the soil, you just create the area like I showed in that last photograph. They didn't have a under drain in there. All he did was burn it up, put the soil, loosen the soil, the natural soil on the bottom down to about a couple of feet, then put his soil mixture in there, and it works really good.
Okay.
I put in the chat that if you're going to do any digging, you can call 811, which is the Tennessee. Here I can share my screen. It's like a free service. You call them, they give you a number. A guy comes out, marks your lawn with where the various utilities are, and it's good for like 20 days, and you can extend it for free. And that way, if you dig and if you happen to hit something, you're safe because you've been warned. But if you dig without getting marked and you run into something, then you're kind of on your own. But it doesn't cost anything, and I've done that a couple times when we were digging in an area that was close to our meters, which is where all my water is, which is where all the water that I would I would want to make a rain garden out of. But it's really easy to do, just FYI. Can you expand on that, Tom? Do you know? I mean,
Yeah.
if you do it, if you.
Sure, we've done it a couple times here at the Ag Center when we when we do digs, and they come out and they use different color of spray paint to tell you where the gas and the water and the electricity is, and it's pretty helpful.
I think the idea is that if you have it marked, you're safer than
the mark stays on your grass. Mark
then
stays
if you
grass for a week or so.
Oh yeah, it doesn't hurt anything, and it does. Yeah, the rain washes it away.
Yeah.
But it's just a good and it's just a good thing to do before you do any serious excavating.
Definitely, if you're hiring some work done, they should know about that. But if they don't, make sure you get it done.
Right. Okay, that's.
The university has a rain garden site too.
Mm-hmm.
If you go into University of Tennessee and type in rain gardens, I think you'll go to that you'll get something, I'm sure.
Mike, do you have any other words of wisdom for us?
No, and like I said, on stuff like this, look at your yard, look how the drainage goes. And put it this way, everybody that has a house has downspouts. Where those downspouts go, you can sort of follow the trail. And I like the idea that if you don't do anything else, just the simplicity of adding some rocks, some interest instead of just a splash block at the bottom, have something in there. It gives interest to your yard. And if you want to continue the rain garden, it's not hard to do. Like I said, I took my whole side yard and basically did the same thing to it, where I could actually have the water run around to that whole, it basically fed the whole side yard, all my gardens over to the west side. That as long as I got rain every 2 or 3 days, I never had to worry about watering, and I had a full-blown irrigation system. So it's great. I'm glad everybody has some interest in it. The thing I wanted to say is if anybody's got any personal questions or something like that, my email address, if you don't have it, like I said, most people do, it's tnmastergardener@aol.com.
You'll be getting some pictures, I'm sure.
Well, that's okay. I don't mind. Like I said, that's probably what I spend most of my time doing now, is trying to answer questions from people, mostly about weeds, though.
Very good. I want to thank Mike, and I know a lot of people have been thanking you on the chat line too, and taking up a little Saturday morning. I know you enjoy doing this as well, and so hope everybody's gonna going to keep coming to the third Saturday programs.
One of the things is anybody that has interest, like I said, you're welcome to go down to the aquarium. It's a nice thing. Like I told them, Stephanie and I slip down there in the evenings and do a little weeding after working all day. And it's just a nice little area. You can do it by yourself. And if you want to get some cut flowers, please take a bouquet. I mean, it's something to add to the yard because there's something constantly in bloom down at the garden. And we're getting so many comments down there. A lot of people are coming by. They'll come in there and back before all this hit, there's somebody down there at lunch all the time sitting and having their lunch and looking at the flowers.
Oh, that's great.